Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cyber Voices, the official podcast of the Australian Information Security Association, otherwise known as AISA. I'm your host, as always, David Willett, and it is my pleasure to have you with us as we explore the diverse voices of the Australian cyber industry. Welcome back to Cyber Voices. It's another episode in the virtual studio today. This episode is marking a special celebration that I personally have not seen a lot of in the cyber industry, but a little bit more these days. Now, whilst this episode is going to go live on the 1st of July, it is at the end of the month of June, which you may or may not know is celebrated somewhat globally these days as Pride Month. Now, Pride Month is a time to reflect on the progress made, the challenges still faced, and the vibrant contributions of the LGBTQI+ community. And it is widely celebrated in the corporate space a lot these days as well. Before I introduce my guest today, I did just want to give a little bit of a history. So if you don't know why Pride Month is celebrated in June, now it began in honor of what you may see referred to on the internet as the Stonewall Riots in New York City in June of 1969, but more commonly known to those of us in the community as the Stonewall Uprising. Now, Stonewall Uprising represents a turning point in the fight for LGBTQIA+ rights, and what started as a protest has grown into a global movement of visibility, advocacy, and celebration. In a similar vein, the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras started as a protest against the often brutal treatment of gay people by law enforcement and the public in general. Today, Pride is more than just rainbow cupcakes. It's celebrating love, life, community, visibility, and creating safe and inclusive workspaces where people can be their true and authentic selves. So in this episode, I am joined by a fabulous panel of individuals from across Australia and from across the AISA land as well. Together, we're going to share some of our personal journeys, the good, the bad, the ugly, of what it's like being LGBTQIA+ in cybersecurity, and celebrating the launch, or not the launch, it's been around for a while, but we will be celebrating the Pride in Security network as well, which you'll be seeing a lot more of in the coming months. So, joining me, I have got Meagan McClendon, Sean Barnett, and Joshua Craig. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Now, let's just go through one by one. So, what I am interested is to hear a little bit about who you are, how you identify, what position you hold within cybersecurity, within the cybersecurity industry, and what that position means. I'm going to randomly pick someone to go first. I'm going to pick Josh because he's leaning in the closest.
Thanks, David. So, look, hi, Josh Craig. I identify as he/him. My role in cybersecurity, I am a cyber and technology risk manager for Australian Unity, and by that, we're keeping a whole lot of people who are in aged care, health, and medical facilities safe. So looking out for a diverse sort of business as well as wealth management and banking. So that's my role there as head of first line there. And why is the role in cyber so important to me is because I think growing up, a lot of us who sort of take on these roles, we like to somewhat be the defenders, be the champions. And it's always that sort of headspace that you get into when you're looking at the work that was ahead of us and making sure that we want people to stay safe. And it's that sort of mindset that goes into it. And so that's probably why role in cyber is very important for me.
I personally have felt that there is a certain giving back to our jobs. There is we're sort of the heroes that hide in the shadows a little bit, which, you know, could be an analogy for some people's experiences within our community as well. I'm going to jump over to Meagan next.
Hello, my name is Meagan. I go by they, them, she, her pronouns. So you can use either. I identify as non-binary, which means I don't really identify with being a man or a woman. I kind of identify somewhere in the middle. It's different for everybody, but that's where I'm at. I work currently in Canberra as a managing security consultant, basically being assistant director for the programs that we deliver to the federal government. And we keep the data and systems safe for our clients who are the federal government. So realistically, who am I keeping safe? It's all of us, all of everybody, probably listening to this right now. It's a really awesome job. I really like working in this space. I feel like it's a very important role to be in. I really like working with federal government. It means that I get the opportunity to be my whole self at work, not only because I'm working within the government and there's a lot of protections for people like myself there, but also with my clients, very opening and welcoming. I feel that my role in cyber is really important because being very visible in cyber is very important to me. I think that realistically, when we look at the generational differences, when we start going into Gen Z and Gen Alpha, we see more LGBTQIA plus people than we do in some of the older generations. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I won't get into it right now. But making that space very welcoming, I think, is very important. So kind of along the lines of giving back, I like to pave that road and keep it open for everybody.
So we've got a bit of the eastern side of the country well represented, but let's head over to the west. Joining us live from Perth right before doing a Pride in Security event for the ASA Perth chapter, it is Sean Barnett.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so I identify as a gay man, and you can use whatever pronouns you would like to, but I generally go by he, him. My role in cyber is I'm currently a cybersecurity manager at a managed service provider that's headquartered here in WA. We primarily focus on providing cybersecurity services to small, medium business, somewhat in the, mining sector, given it's WA, but also across other sectors such as financial services and insurance services as well. So in terms of what we cover every day is everything from incident response all the way through to governance, risk and compliance for those clients, which is really cool and rewarding because we were able to take what enterprise do really well in cybersecurity and give it to small, medium business, which is really rewarding. In terms of why do I love cyber? Why do I think it's important? I think problem solving is why I get out of bed every day. I think we all face problems and challenges throughout our life, including as being part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And so I really, really enjoy problem solving and love to do that at work too.
Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I personally feel that pride and LGBTQI is not something that I've seen openly celebrated a great deal in the cyber industry. Maybe within each individual organizations, your experiences could indeed be different. I'm interested to hear everyone's experiences having been or being a member of the LGBTQIA plus community whilst working within cyber. I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I think it's actually interesting because I changed careers into cyber, and I did that right around the time I came out. So I kind of switched into cyber from before I was teaching English in Japan, and then I had a bunch of other jobs before and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Moved into cyber because I felt that the tech community was full of a lot of people kind of like myself, and that led me towards that direction. I felt like a lot of times when I met people, at least in local government, that they were all very welcoming and very lovely. And a lot of them were part of the LGBTQIA plus community as well. So I think that kind of made me feel at home here. Now, I know that it really does depend on where you work and who's around you. But yeah, I think personally, I've had a pretty good run of it. I know that other people might have different experiences to that. I think that from internally, I've had a good time, but I will say that sometimes with clients that I've had in the past, it's been hit or miss whether or not they really understand, especially because I do use they, them pronouns. I always have a little bit of a worry when I first meet people, like, how's it going to go? But mostly it's been fine, and I've felt very welcomed and embraced. So that's been quite nice.
It sounds like one of the challenges there is just making sure people know what pronouns you prefer to be referred as. Are most people these days, in your line of work, and I know you work in the ACT. I'm a former Canberran. I know the Canberra bubble is a real thing.
It really is.
Yeah. How are you finding attitudes towards that conversation around these are my preferred pronouns? They may be different to what you're used to or what you've grown up with.
There are many like them, but these ones are mine. Yes. So
yeah.
I think that really depends on who you're talking to. And I think, like, I also don't mind using she, so I'm not somebody who's as, I guess, strict with they, them necessarily, but I do know that once people get to know me, they tend to use they just because of how I am. And I do kind of feel like at least it gives me some small joy when I hear my colleagues and other people using it, because it's like, oh yeah, they get it. All right, cool. And I don't really have personally, a huge issue with people using she, her. And I definitely know that my clients tend to use that because when they look across the room, they see a lot of men, they see a lot of women, they see me, and I appear, although if you're listening to this, you can't tell right now, but I do have a very long-haired mullet currently. So on camera, I basically look like I've got long hair. They just see, yep, another girl, awesome, she, her. And I don't really mind that too much. But yeah, it's not something that I'm too much of I don't stick to the point very often. And that's not just not because I feel like I can't. It's more of just a personal preference.
So I think I've been incredibly fortunate. I left university into a grad role at a major bank here in Australia back in 2004, which ages me. But straight away was welcomed as gay male. There was no issues, no problems. And look, even in some of the more conservative parts of a bank where you are judged on the type of suit that you're wearing, again, not a problem. So over those 19 years with that major bank, we actually started to see IDOL being celebrated, pride groups, sponsoring Mardi Gras. So it was a very progressive sort of environment. And look, I'd have to say, towards the end of it, I was also comfortable saying I'm in a polyamorous relationship. So, and I thought telling my folks that was going to be the hardest part, but turns out it was telling my co-workers that at some point. No one batted an eyelid. And it was the most sort of liberating experience to be able to know, actually, I'm working in an environment where people are actually focusing in on the well-being of others as opposed to maybe labels. So that was great. And it also gave me the confidence of, in my new role, which is more in a healthcare-focused environment, again, very progressive company. They celebrate pride on a much larger scale, actually, even though they're a smaller organization. And I've never felt more welcomed. But I've also been a mentor for some of those that are coming through who have not had great experiences either in their upbringing or in education, or as they were going through university, and we're having a little bit of trouble transitioning in terms of, hey, you're allowed to be who you are now. So that's always quite wonderful to see that when you're mentoring someone and they come through and they end up blossoming in that environment, it provides that level of, I think the word I'm trying to search for here is reassurance that you're working for a great company. So I think I've really only ever seen the good. I'm so lucky that I've not seen the ugly, but I have seen an insight into folks coming into the industry where that's actually been the case.
A similar question for you. You know, I asked Meagan about having to introduce your pronouns to people and getting them used to that and all that kind of stuff. You have a similar thing where you tell people that you are in a polyamorous relationship. Now, I think when you explain that to probably largely heterosexual audience, it's a little bit different for them. So what's the reaction to that usually?
I think it's because I sometimes just go with my partners or my boys, and then people pick up on the plural nature of that and go, hey, wait, what? Sorry, hang on. You've got two partners? And yeah, I've got two partners. And the next part is usually, oh God, how do you do that? I can barely put up with mine. and
that sounds like what my partner says about me.
And it can be sometimes a bit of an icebreaker. I've actually not had a negative response to it just at all, to be honest. And I say, things like Google Calendar is your friend because the only way you can get the household to function and manage. But it does then start an entire conversation around what it's like to be in a polyamorous relationship and how does it work in terms of the dynamics between all individuals. So I actually find it a little bit of an icebreaker. I think the first time I did it, it felt like I was coming out again. And everyone's coming out story is usually really, it's quite personal. Some have an amazing time, some have a really, really awful time. And I think the first time I did it, I was really nervous, and I was really pleasantly surprised to find the executive at the bank I was working for didn't even bat an eyelid. It's almost as though, oh God, it's just another one of Josh's stories. Right. Okay. Yep. Done. Right. We're good. But it was more than that. It was that they were very, very conscious of providing psychological safety to the team. And as part of that move and that desire to provide psychological safety, they actually did comments saying, are we doing okay, in that you're confident in talking to us about that as leaders? And it created a conversation around both leadership, psychological safety, and just the dynamics between everybody. It was quite good.
Sean, what's your experience been like?
Well, I have to say it aligns with everything that's already been said. I've been incredibly privileged in kind of my journey. I haven't necessarily had a really ugly story. I suppose my only real kind of ugly story was during high school when, I was kind of battling with that question of self-identity and figuring out whether it was just a phase, I suppose, to put it in air quotations and whatnot, and kind of just squashed that side of me away for a while throughout high school. And that came with the pressure of doing well academically as well as socially within high school. So I didn't actually come out until I was in uni. But I think we're incredibly lucky to be in the country that we're in. That's overall relatively accepting of the members of our community. But then also I'm incredibly lucky to work in the organization that I do currently. Being so young has kind of formed a really sort of modern culture where it's not, sort of years upon years of that sort of old traditional culture, I suppose, that hasn't necessarily been unrooted or changed. And prior to that, I was in government. So government in itself is obviously generally pretty accepting and forthcoming, because in some sense it has to be, but then also because it has to be, it's generally culture-wide within the organization. So nothing really too particularly ugly. I haven't had the pleasure of mentoring that many people either in that space. And for the ones that I have sort of had that mentorship with, I think it's, for a lot of them, it's about developing that maturity to understand that it's, their sexual identity or their gender identity or whatever it might be isn't the only part of them that defines who they are. It's, it's definitely a part of them, but it combines in with the fact that, they're amazing at cybersecurity or they're amazing at problem solving or whatever it might be. And those things together, along with what you value and the experiences that you've gone through in life, make up who you are. And that's what makes you, to be a valuable staff member or a valuable member of a team.
I grew up in a time where there kind of were those ugly stories, and I had experienced homophobia in the workplace and fear of expressing who I was. But for me, that's why doing things like having these conversations that we're having right now and forming things like Pride and Security, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is really important, because it's wonderful to see a younger person like yourself, Sean, who's like, I've never had that experience. Everyone's always been really, really welcoming, and I've always just been able to be me, which is really, really, really fabulous to hear. And I imagine that just has such a positive impact on how you feel about working in cyber and just your contribution to your company, right? Like, because when you can come to work and be you, and you'd never ever have to second guess it, then the research has allegedly shown over and over again that just pays back to the company in spades, right?
Yeah, of course. And it just speaks to the culture of the organization, right? And like it's also, for our business, it's also about the culture of the clients that we take on. So we're actually, I'm incredibly lucky that our organization is one that definitely picks our clients to make sure that they align with our values. One of those key values being diversity and inclusion. And so, not again that anyone can see because it's an audio only podcast, but right now I don't have, incredibly wacky hair, but normally it'd be colored and all sorts of rainbows and whatnot. And I'd walk into a board meeting with a board of directors to give them advice on cybersecurity or, the latest penetration testing reports, whatever it might be. And they wouldn't bat an eyelid because we were lucky enough that we've got a team that chooses organizations as our clients that align with our values. which makes a big difference.
As somebody with a corporate mullet, I can concur that being able to have whatever hairstyle I like is very nice and liberating.
I've never heard it
but
called
also,
a corporate mullet, so that's amazing.
that's what I call it. No, I think it's so interesting because I think that within the cyber security community, there's quite a lot of inclusion. And I think that comes from a couple different things. One is that the whole industry has had to expand so quickly to meet the demand, which means you've got a lot more people coming in from all over, from different types of backgrounds as well. I think that's kind of helped to, I guess, allow for more pathways for more diverse individuals of all different sorts. But also, I think that the whole community is also made up of a lot of like neurodivergent people and people who are very curious and very interested. And so maybe are a little bit more aware of some of these identities and the fact that we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs and have different feelings, and that's okay. At least that's how it feels to me. Maybe that's just my own personal opinion, but it does make it feel very welcoming no matter where I go, no matter how absolutely crazy I'm dressing. I still find that I'm, within reason. I feel that you can really bring your whole self to work. And I know that my colleagues know I work a very specific kind of way. And I'm kind of a little bit wacky, I think, maybe. And that's okay. And people just are like, yep, that's just Meagan, all good. It's really nice to be able to do that.
No, that's awesome. I think it also, like being in IT and cybersecurity, I mean, we're also used to change and we're also used to things maturing and innovating and so quickly as well, right? That someone coming in who is slightly different or, has had a different perspective on life or identifies differently isn't something that we're like so shocked by because we're so used to change.
Now, the reason why I've got Josh and Meagan here in particular is because when I first started getting heavily involved in ASA, you were just sort of starting to get this concept of pride in security off the ground. And I remember thinking, oh, finally, a pride alliance, for want of a better term, within cyber. Like I had one at my workplace. I'd seen them in other organizations. I'd seen pride in law. I'd seen pride in recruitment, all that kind of stuff, right? And I was kind of jealous that we didn't have that. Now we've been running some pride in security events like social drinks and stuff like that. Some of the most recent cybercons, but. Tell me, I mean, maybe I'll start with you, Josh. Where did pride and security come from? Because I think there's a little bit of an interesting story behind it.
There is. And it's an amazing amalgamation of timing too. So two things occurred in close proximity. So I was lucky enough to attend DEF CON in the United States back in 23, and I went to a queer mixer. So QueerCon, which has had a very long history with DEF CON, with some ups and downs, and it provided space for the queer community to come together and meet. And so I just rocked up and was completely blown away by probably over maybe 100, 150 folk had just taken over a space at DEF CON and were having a social mixer. At the same time, I was also on the program committee for the ASA CyberCon, and I was running through some ideas. How could we get QueerCon to come? How could we get something like QueerCon here in Australia? And I came across a submission for speaking at the ASA CyberCon, and it was me.
Mm-hmm. It was.
And I sort of read through it and went, okay, well, we need to connect. We really do, because, and I'll probably let Meagan talk a little bit more about the topic of her presentation, but it was like, this is almost like a perfect storm of timing here. And I reached out timidly on LinkedIn to go, hey, hi, my name's Josh. I'm this is what I'm doing. I was wondering if you'd like to have a chat about developing some sort of pride network within Australian cybersecurity.
Oh, so the talk was, you failed me for the last time, how active allyship can help you in cyber. And it was interesting because I had put that through because I had just created a network inside of my own company and was just like, oh, that was really good. And I really love this. And I'm like, why doesn't this exist somewhere else? Like, why is there not one for cybersecurity in general? And I was trying to see, how do I make something like this myself? And so I talked to a couple other groups and organizations and talked to their leaders and had a couple coffees and said, how do I start this? And they said, it's a lot of work to do it all by yourself. Like, try and get some people to help you. And I thought, I'm just so frustrated about this. And so I put this talk in to just be like, we need more active allyship. This is crazy. Like, D&I is great. And like, being aware is great. But being an active ally is what really makes change. And I'm a big change person. Like, I'm all about that. Being visible, leading change, being the change you want to see in the world. And I thought, if not me, then who? So I guess I need to do it. So I was full throttle on this. And then I got this message from Josh that I thought was spam. And I'm like, is this phishing? Am I being fished by North Korea right now? I don't know. And I read it. I looked at your thing. I was like, no, this is a legitimate person. All right, awesome. Like, let's talk. Let's talk. Let's start this. This is crazy. I felt like everything just, the stars aligned and it was perfect.
So back in 2023, when we did the very first Pride and Security drinks, it was an experiment. We had no idea who was going to rock up. We were supported so much by the board, by the ASA ops team, by MEC, the Melbourne Exhibition Centre team. They all went out of their way to make sure that we could have a space that was semi-private, but also it had its own sort of really lovely vibe. And the other thing that actually really helped too was we had allies. We had so many allies, and some of them from the bank I was working at the time, who were running around handing out stickers, who was doing some promotion, really, really helping out. And I'd loved that vibe. It was so lovely. And I think we had just on 60 to 80 people come through to watch a couple of drag shows, have some drinks, have some nibbles. And it was quite wonderful to see. But it was the feedback that Meg and I got afterwards, and some of it was really touching.
Made me cry.
I did, actually. I was a bit teary. Yeah. We had, I don't know, and obviously my names, but we had one lad come up who basically said that, as a international student who's gotten a grad job here, they had no idea about it. And their colleagues had seen some of the stickers and flyers at CyberCon and said, hey, come on, come to this. We'll come and hold your hand. So they were being allies to an individual who had never really been to anything like this, but came up and said, thank you so much, because in, where I come from, I can't tell people I'm gay. Mm-hmm. It's actually illegal. But here I get to actually, not only be open with my work colleagues, but also see that I'm in an industry where people are going to accept me for that. I'm not often stumped for words, right? But I was quite breathtaken about it. And it made me feel so neat. And I did say to those, my fellow board members at the time, like, this is amazing. Thank you for for helping enable this. And so that sort of was the kickoff for Pride and Security. And I think it's probably important to also know, we're going to start taking a much sort of bigger focus on Pride and Security now, and sort of not so much reboot it, but really just give it a little bit more energy, heading in towards both Sydney Sec and CyberCon in Melbourne this year as well. So again, feeling really, really touched that the team at ASA are going to support us and let us be mad little hatters to run around and actually.
I'm so excited.
There are people like the young person you just referenced, that young international student, who still don't always have that. And it's still quite hard and it's still quite scary for a lot of people. And the safe space that these ally networks create, like Pride and Security, lets them find the other people who are like them. The people with that, because there is a shared experience that we have as members of the LGBTQIA plus community. And I even mentioned myself, Josh, I had never seen so many queer people in the one spot at a cyber event. I'm like, wow, there's actually lots of us. I know. I thought I was the only gay in the village, Megan.
I think we all think that sometimes.
And there was also, at the other end of the spectrum too, we had a vendor come through and say, in 25 years of working in the industry, this is the first time they've been into a queer cyber event.
Sean, who is starting to help us pick some of this up over in the West as well, with the ASA Perth branch running a Pride Month event immediately after we finish recording this podcast. So, Sean, what is the event that you're having this evening? I guess the real question for me is, why is it important for you to step up and speak and be a panelist at a Pride Month event for cyber?
Look, I think the event itself is pretty much going to be very similar to what we've kind of already discussed here. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we're just going to talk about just pride in general, and then what that looks like in cybersecurity, or in just in technology in general, I suppose, because we do have some people from the IT side of it as well, not just cyber. Look, I think awareness is important regardless of what industry it's in, but I think it's specifically important in cyber. I mean, one of the first things we're kind of taught, whether that be through uni or TAFE or even throughout high school, is that once your data's online, it's online, and perhaps you shouldn't be sharing all of that information about yourself straight out of the gate the moment that you meet people. So, we're subconsciously told to shield all of that personal information and who we are from, the internet and everyone around us. Even more so when you work in cyber, right? Like if people who want to go on and be executives in big businesses or work in federal government with security clearances and things like that, they're all told, you got to keep as much personal information about yourself to yourself. So I think events like this, where I'm kind of privileged that I don't necessarily have a problem with sharing that kind of information about me, is really good for those people who may have to sort of keep some things about themselves to themselves, but show them that the pathway's already been walked and they're not alone in that environment and in our industry. Because it is a wonderful industry to work in. And I'm sure if we did more of those events, that we would see more members of the community in person. And you wouldn't be, you realize you weren't the only gay or, lesbian, bisexual, transgender person in the village.
Let's sort of talk pretty bluntly for a moment about what we're seeing happening overseas. That things in the last 12 months, diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI has become a dirty thing to say in some parts of the world. And I've been particularly proud of our country and the organizations and the industries within our country for really doubling down and going, I know the organization I work for has gone, no question. DEI is very much a part of our culture and our makeup. But a lot of that stuff that's going on elsewhere is kind of scary and can still create that environment where people feel like, oh, maybe it's not okay to be my true, authentic self.
Why would you want a team of people who are exactly the same, who have had the exact same life experience and the exact same trauma or the exact same celebrations in their life? They're all going to think the same, and they're all going to come up with the same solution to the same problem every single time. Like diversity and inclusion and all of the benefits that brings from a corporate perspective as well. Not only are you going to get a diverse range of thinking, you're going to get a diverse set of outcomes and a diverse set of solutions to the problems that we face every day. So I don't see any downside. I don't know why there is such a downside to it.
And especially when we're talking about cybersecurity, when we're talking about designing systems and what those systems data should be or shouldn't be, I think it's always interesting to me to see that there are systems that just can't handle things like changing your last name for married women, let alone changing your name in general if you're transgender. And I just think it's probably because they didn't have any of those people there while they were making those systems.
Instead of assumptions, right?
They might have had that input. Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to me because this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about being visible, is that the more I'm around, the more people ask me questions. And I know that there is a little bit of an issue there with tokenism, but always trying to make sure I'm involved in projects I feel very passionately about, because I know that I'm giving my perspective into that, and that perspective might not be in that system or in that design if I don't do that.
It's also good to sometimes have uncomfortable conversations. And then sometimes what diversity brings is a level of uncomfortable conversations, but with respect. And with that, you can then start to work through what a solution might be. But you've got to be good at having those uncomfortable conversations and the psychological safety to know that you can have them. And
Which we do in cyber all the time.
Yeah.
we do that all the time. And I think that's where the comparable competitive advantage in diversity starts to really shine through. And to Sean's point before, you avoid groupthink.
Yeah.
But you also start to really problem solve in a way that can really shine through, but you might not get otherwise.
Yeah, I think being able to be comfortable with being a little uncomfortable is always a good place to be, because it means that you're able to share things that, you're not afraid of being shot down, because you know that everybody respects you in the conversation. And like it goes back to the idea of like, some people are afraid to have uncomfortable conversations, but I feel like at least my job, and maybe not everybody has that, but I have to, tell people maybe this isn't a good idea and maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should do something else instead. And being able to feel comfortable doing that is a big part of my job. So yeah, to me, like diversity and inclusion just makes perfect sense here.
If you're listening to this in time and you're going to Sydney Sec, by the way, myself, Megan and Josh will be doing a free coffee, a Pride and a Security coffee catch-up before Sydney Sec. And we'll be doing drinks afterwards as well. So come and see us. But it's more than just, and that's one thing as well. That's helping people meet before the event, which is something that Jackie from AWSN told me that they did when they were starting AWSN. And so let's go get coffee before the conference, before the event, so that we can all go in together. And I think that's going to be really powerful. But it's more than just than drinks and coffees, Josh. Where are we thinking that we'd like to take Pride and Security?
Well, we want it to be able to evolve so that it's also a community-focused initiative for ASA. So that includes reaching out to other parts of the LGBTQIA community that wouldn't maybe otherwise have a lot of contact with the cybersecurity professionals. ASA has been successful in the past with privacy tune-ups at events that you wouldn't traditionally see. So we're hoping to be able to start looking at some outreach programs into the LGBTQIA community to help out with cyber safety, privacy tune-ups, being able to also be visible for those that might be thinking of entering the community or entering the industry from the community. So there's ideas in terms of working within Midsummer, working with Pride groups, Fair Day. These are the sorts of initiatives that can start to then help really bring the community and the cybersecurity professional element together. There's also a sort of discussion happening around launching a mentoring program as we get more momentum going and more folk involved with the program. But it's also just, investigating collaborations with other LGBTQI professional groups, mentoring, cybercom, drag and drinks, diversity breakfasts, and special interest queer meetings as well.
So come join us.
Yeah. And I find that, the more that we're getting out there and the more we're talking about it, the more I'm getting tapped on the shoulder via my email in my ASA inbox. Like we got introduced to Sean only a few days ago to find out what was going on in Perth, and we asked if we could ship over some of the Pride and Security banners and how else could they get involved. And we've got some chats with some people from the New South Wales branch as well later in this week. People want to know, like, what else can they do? How else can they get involved? And I will definitely say, if you want to get in touch with us, probably the best way at the moment, reach out to the podcast. So that's cybervoices@asa.org.au if you want to know more about what we're doing and how to get involved, and I can share that with this group. But I guess that kind of brings to the final question, though, which is, what advice does everyone on the panel have for LGBTQIA plus folk and their allies who are looking to continue this mission of outreach and creating safe space and an awareness of issues facing this community?
I would say, going back to my comment of don't be afraid to be uncomfortable, I always felt that creating these things was always made me nervous, because I thought, oh, well, is this performative? Am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? Should I do more? But I found that every time I've done something, it's always gone in a good direction. That when I make these spaces and try and create these spaces for people, that people can feel the intention behind it. They can feel that I'm genuine. They see what I'm trying to do. And so even if maybe we don't change the world or do anything like that, it's fine. We've created a nice little space for ourselves, and that's really lovely. So I think starting is the hardest part, and you should just start.
Taking the first step and knowing that the path has already been walked and you're not alone. There's plenty of people who are out there who you can reach out to, whether that be someone in the pride and security group, or whether that be someone who doesn't work in security at all, and perhaps work in some other professional industry. People have had to walk the path that you're walking on, or you think you're walking on at the moment. So take the first step, find someone or find a group of people, whether that be within the industry or outside the industry as well. There's plenty of LGBTQIA plus community groups, sporting groups, social groups, whatever it might be, that are all there to sort of help support and nurture people as they grow and figure out the identity crisis that some of us, or most of us, go through.
You can start small. Sometimes it's just by wearing a pride badge or a lapel on a tie to start, or on your just to start a conversation.
Your pronouns, your signature.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be Ben Hur. We can just start small, and seeing how this also has played out in other organisations too. You start small, but bit by bit you'll get momentum, and before you know it, you might even have a small little pride group going within your organisation, and the friendships and the just the fostering of professional collaborations is amazing. I myself have learned more about some of the diverse elements of my current workplace through the reinvigorated pride group that a colleague of mine has started again. And it's amazing because I'm learning more through those connections than I would had I been in the technology bubble, right? So it's brilliant. But yeah, start small.
Thank you all so much for those insights as well. I think I'll tie a bow on that as well by just sort of saying, be gentle with yourselves too. Like, you don't have to get it right. I think that kind of, like the first time around, I think that speaks to Josh's start small. You don't have to start a whole Pride Alliance. You can just find one to be a part of. And it may not even be a professional one too, right? Like I personally get involved in groups like the Melbourne Gamers, spelt GAYMER, which is because I'm a big video gaming nerd and tabletop gaming nerd, and those are my little safe spaces and groups. And that's the wonderful thing about this diverse community that we have, is that whilst we have shared experience, we're also all very, very, very different at our cores, and there's different things that'll work for us. And it's okay to find it a little bit scary.
I think if you're an ally and you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, but what can I do? Realistically, those small gestures or those small things, it signals to people around you that you're a safe person. And so we see that. I see that. When I see signature pronouns, I tend to go, oh, okay, this person's going to be cool with me. I don't have to worry about them or be scared of them or anything like that. I think it really does help create that safe space around you, whether you feel it or not, we feel it. So it's always there.
Yeah, I remember starting at my current job almost a year ago now, and on my first day walking on campus, I saw rainbow flag lanyards and people wearing ally badges and pronoun badges, and I was like, there was that instant sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, I'm not going to have that awkward moment of, people finding
what does that mean?
Gay. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you all so very, very much. This has been a really wonderful, insightful conversation, which I feel we could probably carry on for hours. And thank you all so much for sharing your stories and for sharing your voices with us today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cyber Voices. Our music is by Sanar Garut, our show artwork is by Studio Quarantine, and we record our show at This Is a Studio in Pran, Melbourne, part of Pot Plant Productions. please make sure you follow the show on your podcast platform of choice and leave us a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. Also, please follow the association on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you want to add your voice to our ever-growing chorus of diverse cyber voices, have questions, feedback, or would like to be a sponsor, you can do so by emailing us at cybervoices@aisa.org.au. That's cybervoices@aisa.org.au. Are you an ASA member? If not, you should consider joining our network of over 12,000 members across Australia. An ASA membership can open doors, build professional networks, create lifetime friendships, and offer exclusive training, events, and other perks. Become a member today by heading to our website at asa.org.au. That is all for today. I hope you will join us again next time on Cyber Voices.